Let's touch on an issue you discuss in the book, which really highlights the contrast between this idea of there was once open miracles and now closed.
Yeah.
Idolatry is something which, it's the second of the Ten Commandments that's prohibited. We hear it spoken of a lot when we read the Shema. You shouldn't worship idols and worship other gods. But we struggle to relate to that. How can we relate to it? What does it mean? And are there idols of our age?
Right. First of all, there are idols of our age, but not in the same sense. So here's a brief overview. Is the temptation to idolatry was once the most powerful of all temptations. Hence the prime among the negative commandments, the second of the Ten Commandments. There's no way the Torah would prohibit something that's simply silly, right? It should be a 614th commandment, thou shalt not be an idiot.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that, right? So obviously this is posited against something very real. Secondly, the names of idols in Torah are the same names as God's. Elohim Acherim, the same name. That is very, very significant. Hebrew always expresses essence. You would expect the names of false gods to be words denoting emptiness, but they're not. They're borrowed from the names of God. Not Yud Kei Vav Kei, not the name of essence, but other names. This is a sure clue that there's something very real in those forces. And so here's the key. The key is that idolatry was not the worship of a graven image. People weren't so foolish as to make an image in wood and then claim that it made them. Now, that's just ridiculous. A person like that doesn't need religious help, he needs psychiatric help. Idolatry was not that at all. Idolatry was relating to the correct channels of energy, bringing down the dispensation that the world needs from the source. The Kabbalistic term for idolatrous powers are channels, pipelines, tzionorot, bringing down energy, what we call the zodiac, for example. The zodiac, in Hebrew, the word for a zodiac is mazal. Mazal means something that flows. In modern Hebrew, nozel is a liquid. Mazalot means the 12 zodiac elements that take the oneness of the source and bring them down through the channels into the world. An idolater was not some idiot having a fetish that he thought was powerful. An idolater was somebody looking to suckle, to nurture himself from the genuine energies that come down. The mistake he makes is that he doesn't go to the source. He's happy with the agency that delivers the goods. So the Greeks, a god of war and a god of love and a god of fertility, god of wealth. There's no God who created the world. Who needs him? He doesn't deliver the goods. So idolatry is going to the correct source but not going far enough. It's going to the cabinet minister who handles your department rather than going to the one who controls all of it.
Is the cabinet minister someone one can lobby, in a sense? Or is he taking all the directives from the prime minister?
No, indeed. He is given the authority, and sometimes illusory, nevertheless, that it could appear that certain sacrifices made in that direction might be absolutely that. Absolutely. There's a genuine temptation. But the point is that the craving to connect with that source, by the way, the graven images are only representations in the world of those things, right? And they're almost always human in form, by the way, because what's really being worshipped is, I'm what's important. I want him to serve me. Here's the difference. A real servant of God says, God, what can I do for you? An idolater says what his God can do for him. There's a complete reversal, right? And therefore, the concept of idolatry is looking in a genuine direction but not going far enough. The craving was almost irresistible. The men of the Great Assembly who oversaw that transition in Jewish history that we spoke about, they annulled the temptation, the craving for this type of spiritual experience. And from that time on, the idolatry we find in the world is simply ancient customs. The language of the Talmud is minhag avosem yadem. These are old, paying respect to old customs. So people today who offer gifts to gods and images and in the Far East and so forth, they're doing it out of respect for tradition, but there's no almost uncontrollable craving.
So is it even classified as idolatry?
That's a good question again. Indeed it is, because technically if you bow down to an image, you are transgressing. I have Buddhist friends.
So would you say it's probably they're less culpable in a sense? Because it's, I don't know, less serious?
Technically, no. No, on the contrary. I would say probably the earlier generations may have been less culpable because they had a much stronger temptation.
Yes, yeah.
I have Buddhist friends who refuse to bow. They do the meditation, or Japanese sword fighters, or martial arts experts. They, in fact, in Jewish law, you may bow to an opponent before you kill him. No problem with that. But you may not, you can bow in respect to a teacher, but not to an object or a space. So the Japanese sword fighters, for example, or the kendo fighters, the religiously knowledgeable Jewish ones, they will not bow to the weapon.
Some people bow to the kotel, I think, when they go there.
That's simply a respectful, deferential backing away.
Right.
But bowing to God, yes. We gave up bowing and also praying with the hands extended because those were Christian customs. Nevertheless,
that used to be done?
Indeed,
oh, wow.
indeed, yeah, absolutely. The correct position for prayer is to extend the hands above and in front.
Wow.
Absolutely, yes. But that was decreed that we should not do that because it became a Christian practice, and to differentiate ourselves, we don't do that. So, idolatry nowadays is an empty shell compared to what it once was, and was one of the significant changes made by the men. The key is this: when they annulled the desire for idolatry, they annulled the ability to be a prophet. These are two faces of the same thing. Idolatry means I reach beyond myself and I extend myself to connect with the source. Prophecy means I hear the source speaking to me. When you take the organ for one of those out of the human psyche, you lose both functions.
And you also say that that's when atheism becomes more...
Indeed, idolatry became atheism. We're on the eve of Hanukkah. Hanukkah was the beginning of the battle with the Greeks, who taught not that there's a false God, but that there's no God. It was the first time in history that anyone could suggest such a thing. Before that period of history, nobody could cogently suggest such a thing, because it was clear that there was a spiritual reality. You made contact with it continually. Our generation is a generation that's completely disconnected.
So when we say that the Amalekites were sort of the anti-Jewish people, so to speak, Haman, who wanted to wipe out the Jews, denied... he was still living in a time where you had prophecies, so...
With Haman?
With Haman, yeah.
Yes, what's the connection between Amalek and...
Well, he was an Amalekite.
Yes.
But
what does that have to do with idolatry?
Well, it has to do with idolatry because wasn't the point of Amalek that they were denying God's existence, or was it different?
No, the early we might call atheists in the early phase were people who all acknowledged that there was God. But to a greater or lesser degree, they denied his involvement in the world. Technically, that's called the watchmaker theory. He created it and wound it up. Where did this come from otherwise? Only the world's in a big mess, in case you hadn't noticed.
Yeah.
Means he's not involved anymore.
Yeah.
That was even the Greeks acknowledged that there must have been a God who created the world and happened by itself. That's an invention of the modern age.
Sure.
That it doesn't need explanation.
Right. And so you're saying also when they take away this desire for idolatry, we also probably have a harder time with spirituality in general.
Indeed we do. Indeed. We have in fact, the scientific ethos within which we live is an ethos and an ambience of, there's no ultimate level, there's no transcendent level at all.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get. The Greeks specifically introduced that. We deal with what we can experiment with empirically and what we can reach philosophically, that's all. And our battle against them was there's something higher. That's why the Greek battle was fought against the high priests of the Jewish people, the Kohanim. Why did they suddenly become? Because they represent a connection with something higher. The Maharal famously points out that the word Kohen equals 75. 7 is always the number of the natural world. 8 is always the transcendent world. 75 is the number that joins the two. Kohen is the one who joins the two. So it was those who assert that there's a spiritual world that can be manifest here who battled the Greeks. And nothing could be more relevant to us. We today are Greek. Our heads are Greek. All of our Western structures are Greek. Politics, economics, history, aesthetics, architecture, painting.
Not Roman as well?
Well, the Romans were the mighty empire who spread Greek thinking around the world. The Romans didn't have a culture of their own, right? The Romans were the muscle that built on Greek thought. So our world today, even the English language, goes back to Latin and a Greek root. So we today are thoroughly Greek. Jews who live in the Arab world is a different question. They were brought up with a different ordeal and a different nemesis. But ours is clearly the Greek world.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.